Not safe for work. Teachers, what are some family secrets you know about people because their kids told you? Viewer discretion is advised. Please do like, share, and subscribe. When my daughter was in 2nd grade, her school allowed parents to come to lunch with them, so every couple of weeks I'd pack a lunch and sit with her and her classmates in the cafeteria. One time, a friend of hers says, "Can I tell you a secret?" So I said, "Sure." He looks around, then says, "My dad told me when he was in college, he had a huge afro." I tried not to laugh and just told him his dad must be pretty cool. Not nearly as serious as most of these, but one time I was in a class and a grade 1 student had something very important to tell me. Student: "Mister?" Me: "Yes." Student: "When we went to Mexico, my dad pooped his pants." I work at a very socioeconomic disadvantaged school. I teach kindergarten. Most of mine are sad and distressing, but the one that sticks out: my student went MIA for 2 weeks or more when she finally shows up. I asked her where she was and she told me, "We went to see my daddy. He loves us so much that he made us stay." I said, "Oh, fun." Still not understanding. "Where did y'all go?" She said, "I don't know. We weren't allowed to leave and the windows didn't work." I found out later that her mom drove them to visit their dad in a different state, and dad held him hostage the entire time until the son was able to sneak a call. Mom shaved her pubes, so dad beat her up because he thought she was cheating on him. So kind of the opposite. I teach English as a foreign language to adults and sometimes a bit younger, like 16 to 18 years old. 5 years ago, I was teaching a class that included a 17-year-old kid from a pretty strict Muslim nation. He was rather pious and could get a little preachy sometimes. I also taught his dad in a 1-to-1 class. The dad, who was very highly regarded in his field, was doing a second PhD while working for one of his government ministries. At first, he also appeared to be a devout practitioner of Islam, taking prayer breaks at the correct times with his son and other Muslim students in their faith room, quoting from the Quran, etc. After a few weeks of lessons, I developed a good rapport with the father. He was great to chat with and we'd talk about everything. One day, we got onto the topic of religion, something I try to steer clear of. I'm a live and let live, try to respect everyone type atheist. He asked me about my faith. I think he assumed I'd be C-O-V-E, Christian, being of British. So I gingerly told him I didn't follow a religion, expecting a look of disappointment, but instead he looked relieved and told me he'd lost his faith years ago and that he was living a lie at home with his family as well as his community back in his home country, something he could be executed for at worst and ostracized by his huge, incredibly close family at best. He told me how he was terrified of his son because he might realize he was just going through the motions when he worshipped and tell others and the consequences it could result in. Poor guy. I hope he's okay. Not a specific secret, but maybe yours. If you sleep naked, your kids will not hesitate to tell your teacher. I'm aware of which parents are on Team Commando in my school. While picking up my kids from school, I overheard 2 10-year-olds talking about a show or movie, and one kid says, "He was cheating." That's when one married person is having sex with someone that's not their husband or wife. Other kid nonchalantly says, "Oh yeah, my mom does that." Whoa. I was going to have to start out at like a state college because my mom wanted me to work my way through school like she did. But then I caught daddy fucking the maid, so he has to pay my tuition for proper school. One of the undergrad students in a class I TA'd in New York City as a grad student. A few years ago, a student was telling me how excited he was that his mom and his aunt were having their babies soon and that they'd both be siblings. After a lot of explanation, it turned out that my student's dad had knocked up both his wife and his brother's wife around the same time. The aunt and uncle were still married and apparently okay with this. I got when I know my kid's teacher found out. I was pregnant with my 3rd child, but it was high risk and I had to take daily abdominal injections to keep my son alive. I had a clotting disorder and it had cost us our middle child. My oldest, who was 3, began imitating me injecting myself at school with the Play Doctor kit. That was an interesting conversation. I heard a story about CPS calling parents because a little girl told her teacher said she likes sitting on Grandpa's hard leg. Turns out he was an above-the-knee amputee. Oh, God. So apparently, when I was in preschool, my teachers asked if we knew what our parents did for a living, and I said, my daddy works in an office, and my mommy lives in a hospital. And then when the teacher was talking to my dad, she was like, oh, does your wife work in a hospital a lot? And my dad said, no, she's actually sick in the hospital. My mom was in and out of the hospital for about a year when I was little. Anyway, my mom is still alive, and she's doing great now. Not really a family secret, but was to the students' peers. But brothers in my class, who claimed to be twins, had different moms. I teach a preschool class, and I know that one of the moms is having an affair because one of the kids keeps telling me about mommy's friend that comes round when daddy works nights and gives mommy special cuddles to keep her happy. Oh boy. Not a teacher, but when I was a kid, my parents used to joke that I was a miracle baby born 4 months early. The truth is, my mother was already 4 months pregnant with me when she married my father. My brother believed them, and when he was around 5 or 6, told his entire class that I was a miracle baby. Teacher obviously knew what was up and had to call my parents in for a conference to let them know. I work in an upper SES school, and I know of several families who have milled out their address to other families so that their children can attend a better school. I found out when a student of mine who supposedly lived in a very wealthy neighborhood confided in me that she didn't have any food at home. Originally, I thought she was just being dramatic. Then she just confessed everything to me. I sent her home with my last $10 and made it a point not to let her or any of my students to go hungry. Every so often, I notice the same address being used for multiple students with no relation to one another. I have also kept a pantry in my classroom ever since, always stocked with Chef Boyardee's, cereals, and other non-perishables, even though I never would have expected the need to do so when I first started working there. I used to work at a summer camp. There was a kid there who was pretty chill, very laid back, and fun to be around. The second year I knew him, he basically told me that his dad was the leader of a cult that believed that the boy was the second coming of Christ. Apparently, when Dad was having fertility issues, Mom got pregnant. Dad said it was a miracle. Mom disagreed. They divorced and Mom got custody, but this kid would go and spend a few weeks every year with a bunch of people who thought he was the second coming. Edit. The last time I had interactions with this kid, he was 15 and still a great kid. No weird issues. As for Mom cheating, she remarried to a man that had a shocking resemblance to his stepson. I only met him at camp closing once or twice, but he looked more like the kid than the other guy. My first semester being a TA, I find out one of my students was kicked out of his house for being gay. He was living in his car. I passed his info onto my supervisor and the student's advisor so they could help with housing, but he wasn't in my class next semester. Taught both a son and daughter separately English in Taiwan. Son opens this file on the computer, starts to read it to me. It's basically a letter that is detailing a sexual encounter. The one thing I remember is that it mentioned the stained carpet as it being a fun afternoon. The boy was about to be 12. After class, I mentioned to the mom that he had shown me this, and I have no judgment about it, but maybe it might be better to hide the correspondences a little better. Next week, as soon as I arrive, the mom approaches me and says, "I'm sorry for the misunderstanding last week. That letter was a submission to her from one of her own students at school." Okay. Second story, different family. Grade 2 girl details her family's farting abilities, proceeds to explain how if she can let a ripper go that her grandfather gives her the equivalent of $5. Her mom is the best farter in the family. They always are. Honestly, just the sheer amount of abuse I have heard of from students is the worst of it. I've been a teacher for 4 years now, and I have had to call CPS for 11 students. Shit gets depressing sometime. Besides that, I had a student tell me last year he got a Nintendo Switch because he caught his dad with another woman, and his dad got it for him so he wouldn't tell Mom. I had a student aged about 5, and one of our projects was to bring in a picture from home to write a presentation about. All his classmates brought in pictures of their families, and he brought in one of his sister and his mom. Should mention I teach in Japan, and divorced families, single parents, etc. are not as accepted as they are in other countries, so the fact that this kid had an unusual family stood out. All the other kids asked him, "Where's your dad?" I kept a close ear, ready to deal with any discomfort the kid might have felt about being asked. Maybe his parents were divorced, maybe his father had passed, or maybe his mom was a single mom. I was ready for all those outcomes, until he said, "My daddy is somewhere far away because he is a bad man. He used to hit my mom and my sister, and sometimes he tried to hit me too. So he had to go somewhere far, far away so he won't hit us anymore, and he went back to coloring." Luckily, the kid who asked came from a single mom family, so he happily shared that he was too fatherless, and that the two seemed to bond over it, but I was heartbroken. What a horrible thing to deal with when you're as young as 5. Not really a teacher, but a volunteer for a summer camp for kids. We were randomly discussing that smoking is bad for you, and then it went to drinking also being bad. One of the girls said, "I know drinking alcohol isn't healthy, but I'm not too worried about my dad. He drinks very often, but he only drinks alcohol in really, really small glasses." Yep, her dad likes to party or he has a problem. I hope not the latter. Not a teacher, but everyone in my year found out this one girl's parents were swingers when we did a drug and alcohol awareness program. She proudly declared that her parents and their friends never drove after they'd been drinking. "Oh yeah? How can you be so sure?" Someone asked, "Because they always put their keys into one big bowl and nobody goes home until the morning." A couple kids knew what was up and started telling everybody what that meant. By the end of the week, the whole school knew about it. Not a teacher, but I was the quiet kid. People always seem to drop their guard around us quiet kids. Just because I choose not to talk doesn't mean I'm deaf. Oh well. I heard all sorts of things. A classmate of mine was coerced into a sex, aka rape. A teacher was supposedly getting a little too close and touchy with another. Both were married. Teachers openly discussed stupid and little shits with me in the room. Another teacher sold weed to athletes. The old NJROTC fucks were definitely pedophiles, just based off of the way they conduct themselves. Taking into account the things I've heard, and I could put those fuckers away for life. Those are just a few of the things that currently come to mind from our 4 years of high school.